It seems like at least once per year, the Rise of Kingdoms community collectively gets together and says, wait a minute, I feel like they're releasing commanders too fast right now. And with legendary Pelagius landing in the game at the same time as Vercingetorix and Elizabeth I, this feels like that moment that we get every year where it's like, wait, 3 new legendary commanders all at the same time. And also, didn't we just get Alp Arslan and Hayam Waruk? So today what I want to do is analyze if we are actually getting commanders faster than we normally do right now, and then on top of that we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means for the future of Rise of Kingdoms, because this time actually does feel a little bit different. And finally we'll also talk about what you can do when it feels like there's too many commanders coming to the game, because there's a pretty straightforward answer there, and I think a lot of people forget it. A lot of times we get excited about new things landing in the game and we lose sight of just the fundamentals of investing in things in Rise of Kingdoms. So that's what we're going to cover today. But before we jump in, of course, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I'm a partner creator with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you want more Rise of Kingdoms content, drop a like down below. It really does help out the channel a ton, and we are so close to 100,000 subscribers, so make sure you subscribe down below as well. But without further ado, let's start with legendary Pelagius, because this is the commander that I feel like tips the scale in the direction of, okay, we're getting commanders a little bit too fast, on top of the fact that the release window of Vercingetorix and Elizabeth is actually much faster than even the fast release cycle that we see in the game historically. I'll talk about that with my spreadsheet in just a minute that covers all the commander releases, but first I want to touch on Pelagius, because this is the one that actually kind of quietly raises a red flag for me for actually a couple of different reasons. Okay, if you guys missed it, I know this information came out a couple of days ago, but legendary Pelagius is going to land in the game with the newest update, and it looks like upgrading from epic Pelagius to legendary will cost money. I guess this is a high value bundle according to the most recent update highlights video over on the official Rise of Kingdoms channel. And of course, when you do upgrade, you get a refund of all of your stars and your epic commander sculptures, and it says after advancing your commander, you will no longer have access to epic Pelagius. All previously used progression materials for this commander will be returned. Now, I was under the impression that legendary Pelagius was coming with an event. It would be a limited time thing, but based on this video, it sounds like this is a permanent upgrade for Pelagius. And the reason that the developers specifically are doing this is to make early game cavalry a little bit more balanced. Right now they have an actual garrison they can use, and they've got an AoE skill damage commander. And this is where I feel a little bit weird about this setup here, okay? Because if we think about, like, okay, it makes sense from a game balance perspective, Cavs now have a better garrison in the early game and yada yada, that makes a lot of sense, right? But then the question becomes like, well, okay, how did we typically tweak the early game meta in years past, right? Well, the answer is it would be from new civilizations. They would release a new civilization, and with that would come an epic and a legendary commander. They would land in the golden chests. Last time we saw that was, I think, the beginning of 2025 with the Mayan civilization. We got Siege and we got Lady Seong-Gye, Siege being a rally archer commander for the early game, okay? And historically, that's how the developers have kind of tweaked this early game meta, right? And so for me, when I look at this, I'm thinking, okay, well, why would we go this route of upgrading Pelagius when we could just have a whole new civilization, a whole new commander land in the game, and tweak the early game meta in that way, right? And for me, what this feels like is kind of an admission that we're not getting a new civilization anytime soon, right? Because the most logical, way to have solved the early game meta balance problem would be to do that, right? And that's what they've done almost every year since the game came out. So that's kind of a bummer, right? I like when they add new civilizations to the game. I feel like it's not really necessarily new content, but it is a new design of your city and it's new commanders. And typically big releases of civilizations are when the game gets a big marketing push and lots of new players come to play the game and try out whatever the new thing is, whether it's the Mayans or whether it's the Vikings or Egypt or whatever the case might be, right? Historically, that's been the biggest marketing pushes for the game. And so with this kind of feels like hey, we're not doing that, but here's a new legendary cavalry commander, right? So I don't love that trade-off for me personally, and I guess also I'm a little bit biased as a content creator. I like when the game has a bunch of new players coming in, right? And I don't know if this is going to really do that, but that's kind of how I feel about legendary Pelagius. Okay, so now that we kind of know how he's landing in the game and what the implications are for the future of Rise of Kingdoms, and or at least the near near term future. Let's jump over to my spreadsheet of all the commanders in the game and sort of their rough release date. It's not perfect. I try to kind of make it as close as I can. A lot of these dates actually correspond to a Tuesday for me, because that's usually when the Wheel of Fortune commander lands in the game. And so anyway, that doesn't really matter. The point is, what we see here is Vercingetorix, Elizabeth I, and Pelagius roughly coming out at the same time, right? I mean, the update for legendary Pelagius is on June 30th. We also know that Elizabeth, her Wheel of Fortune, should be landing the game on the 30th. By the time you watch this video, she might already be up on the Wheel of Fortune, and Vercingetorix is part of her release window, right? Which is why technically the date, I know you're not going to get him on the 30th, you're going to get him when MGE ends, but you get my point. I just like to make these numbers a little bit more even, a little bit easier to understand. Okay, now one of the things that we have to keep in mind here is that historically, with previous releases for the leadership commanders, we do see 3 commanders land in the game. Now the last time we saw that was actually at the end of 2024 with Philip John Hunyadi and Stefan III. Last year we got Matthias and Afonso, right? So that was the first kind of time that we broke that cycle. But also you got to remember, we're getting a new gold gathering commander as well. We have Yaya landing in the game at some point soon, I guess. We haven't really heard much about him. We've only been seeing Vercingetorix and Elizabeth, and also he was announced at the same time as them, but he's actually not in the game yet. If you scroll all the way down here, you'll see that Vercingetorix and Elizabeth are actually in the game already, but he is not. So I don't know when he's coming in the game. I assume he'll be a gold key commander because he's just gold gathering speed. But either way, the point is, not only are we getting Vercingetorix and Elizabeth, we're also getting Yaya, and we're getting Pelagius legendary version. So that's kind of 4 commanders all at the same time, as opposed to what it used to be, which was 3 commanders all at once. And again, I think the reason there is because Pelagius as a legendary kind of takes the place of what would be a new civilization legendary for the early game in 2026. So 4 legendaries all at the same time feels really fast, especially when you consider that we just got Alp Arslan landing in the game in the middle of May, and here we are at the end of June getting like 3 or 4 new legendaries all at once, right? So it is a lot of commanders all at once. I don't think we've ever gotten 4 legendaries at the exact same time, and the release window is much faster than usual, right? So as you guys know, if you've been following the channel for a while, you'll know that there's a few different speeds with which they release new commanders, right? And the most common one, or I would say the average one, is 70 days, right? It's usually 70 days between new Wheel of Fortune and Mightiest Governor commanders, and sometimes that is broken, as you can see here, when there's events that give you these commanders early, right? So we got Arthur a little bit early, as you can see here, because he was part of an event. The same thing happened with Gangam Chan. He was part of an event here, right? So you can see that the numbers look a little bit faster than they actually are, but usually we have either a 56-day release cycle, a 70-day release cycle, or an 84-day release cycle, right? And the fast release cycle is 56 days, the normal one is 70, and the slow release cycle is 84. And that's kind of what we saw with Alp Arslan and Hayam, right? I mean, this was even longer than the 84-day cycle, and so that's probably why the cycle following that is faster than usual, right? And so it kind of balances out, where the archers took longer than expected, the leadership are going to take shorter than expected, and then we're back on track to have normal release cycles after that. That's my best guess. Okay, so in the short term, it does feel like, yes, we're getting a ton of new legendaries all at the same time, 4 legendaries basically in the same like week, depending on when Yaya comes out. Maybe he'll be a little bit later, he's not in the game yet, so maybe that'll be a few weeks later, but even still, that's fast, and it's so soon after the last commander release. But in the grand scheme of things, in the grand scheme of 2026 as a whole, we are halfway through the year, and these will be, you know, we'll have 7 or 8 new legendaries in that time. Okay, so if we look back at 2025, okay, well, how many legendary commanders did we get in 2025 in total? We got 17 legendaries in total. Okay, we've got the regular release commanders here. We also got the 2 KVK 2 ranged commanders, so Archimedes and Mary the First. We also got, like I said, Siaj Ka'ak at the beginning of 2025, and then we got the 2 new gathering commanders, Pepin and Casimir, for a total of 17 legendaries last year. So when we look at 2026 and we say, okay, we've got 7 or 8 commanders landing at the halfway mark, then okay, that actually lines up, it tracks exactly with the release cadence of 2025. The difference there though is that we are expecting more commanders to land for the rest of this year other than just the regular release cycle, right? So when I say that, I mean the Wheel of Fortune, the Mightiest Governor event. We are also expecting a new kvk commander, at least one, if not two, like we saw last year. That is all speculation. I don't know. Technically we don't even know if there is a special kvk story coming this year, although the developers did say, I think 2 years ago, that they were planning to do one every year, right? And so it makes sense that we haven't seen it yet. Typically it comes in the second half of the year, and so that should be coming down the pipeline sometime in the fall or winter of this year. That's my guess. Okay, so we know that we've got the regular release cycle coming, and we've got potentially maybe at least 1 or 2 new kvk commanders coming this year as well. So all in all, I would say that we are on pace to release the same number of commanders in 2026 as 2025, but it could go over by 1 or 2 commanders depending on when the rest of these cycles land. We will have to wait and see. Okay, now on top of that, I will just touch on really quickly here the upcoming cavalry and infantry releases, which we do expect at some point before the end of this year, which is kind of crazy because I feel like Sun Tzu Prime just came out, but that was actually in January, end of January this year. Okay, so kind of insane. But right now my prediction or sort of release dates for the upcoming cav and infantry cycle are the beginning of September for the next cavalry, and then the middle of November for the next infantry. That's my current best guess. And then somewhere in there I expect maybe 1 or 2 kvk commanders. The kvk commanders might come around holiday, so they could come after the infantry release, although if we do get archers for that kvk, it would be weird because then the next release would also be archers, right? So we would actually get 3 archers all in a row. That's a topic for another video. It's also the case that we could see the kvk commanders land sometime in the middle of all this, right? So maybe October, who actually knows? Okay, but that's up in the air. I can't predict that. That's just going to be whenever it's ready. But again, if we take a look at this, then, you know, let's say Yaya is going to land sometime in 26. We know that's going to happen, right? So okay, that's 12 commanders that we have basically guaranteed throughout 2026. If we get 2 new kvk commanders, that would bring us up to 14 total commanders. And again, with Pelagius landing here, I don't expect a new civilization, so who knows? I mean, maybe, right? Maybe, but I doubt it. So okay, we're looking at maybe 14 or 15 commanders for 2026 total. That's on par or slightly less than the last year or 2 of Rise of Kingdoms. Okay, so technically in the long run we're getting commanders at the same release pace, even though right now it just feels so fast because of how soon we're getting all 4 of these new legendaries right after Alp Arslan and Hayam. So the answer is short term faster release cycle, long term same or slower release cycle for legendaries, which is kind of surprising, right? Because it always feels like we're getting commanders really fast, even though technically it's been the same release cadence pretty much as far back as I can remember. I mean, there's little breaks here and there, and it feels faster at certain times because of kvk commanders or gold key commanders, but really it's pretty much the same for years now, no matter how it actually feels. But player perception does play a big part in this, right? Like if players feel like they're coming too fast, then that's kind of all that matters, right? I could sit here and show you a chart and say, well, it's not really any different than usual, but if it feels too fast, then it is too fast, really, from a certain perspective, right? Like how players feel matters. Okay, so what do you do about this as a player if you feel like there's just too many commanders, you can't keep up? What are you supposed to do here? Well, the answer is you have to just return to basics, right? You kind of have to go back to what the fundamentals of Rise of Kingdoms are and have been for years and years and years now, ever since I would say like at least Guan Yu landing in the game, right? Which by the way was February of 2020. That was almost 7 years ago. So for the last like 6.5 years, the fundamental rule of thumb for Rise of Kingdoms is do not get overly excited when new commanders come in the game. Wait for actual testing, right? Whether it's YouTuber testing videos or just actual kvk fighting data, that is really what you should be waiting for when it comes to what commanders should you invest in, right? Because even though we get, you know, 12 to 17 18 legendaries every single year, a lot of those commanders are commanders you can absolutely skip and it won't matter at all, right? So first of all, if you're only a field fighter, which a majority of you watching are, probably 80+% of you watching are field fighters only, then you don't have to think about half the commanders that land in the game, right? You don't have to think about rally commanders, garrison commanders, even though some of those commanders might fit in some of the best pairings in the field. Sometimes, usually it's in a 3 army lineup, right? So 3 infantry, 2 cav, 2 archer, or 3 archer, 2 cav, 2 infantry. right? Usually the only time you run a rally or garrison commander in the field of a particular troop type is if you're running 3 armies of that troop type, right? So for a majority of you, that's not going to be the case. Okay, so right off the bat, you can kind of eliminate half the new commanders and just kind of ignore them, right? Just be like, okay, those are things that whales get to do whale things like rally and garrison. It doesn't matter for the average player. Okay, so already we're down to like maybe 8 commanders a year that you even have to think about, right? And then on top of that, every year we've been getting, you know, 1 or 2 gatherers. We've been getting a new civ commander or a gold key commander, like in the case of Pelagius. I actually don't know if he's going to be gold key or not when he actually lands in the game. He's going to be event only at first, I think, but that's besides the point. The point is that if it's a kvk 1 commander, you can also ignore that, right? You never have to think about that. It's not going to be relevant in the end game, especially with Pelagius, who is a 3 target 1000 damage factor. That's not even close to current meta, even if he had an insane relic on day 1 that gave him, you know, 50% of stats. It's just not strong enough, right? Also it's skill damage cavalry, right? So the other thing you can immediately write off is like, okay, if I see new gatherers and I see new kvk 1 legendaries, those also don't count, right? It doesn't matter. You don't have to think about those. You don't have to invest in those. It's never something you have to think about. It's never going to be endgame meta. We've never seen that, right? Like, just to be clear, we've never seen Rise of Kingdoms release kvk 1 legendaries that land in the game that actually move the needle in the end game. Okay, the only exception would be maybe Mulan in Canyon, and that's it, and that was all the way back in 2020. So for the last 6-7 years, don't even comment, okay, don't even leave the comment, for the last 6 or 7 years, we've never seen a kvk 1 commander be even slightly relevant. Okay, so write off all of those, write off all the gatherers. Okay, so now you're down to like maybe 4 or 5 legendaries every year that you even have to think about when they land in the meta. Okay, and those are the ones that you have to pay attention to. So when it comes down to it, you know, 4 or 5 legendaries a year, that's still a lot, right? Even for somebody like me, I don't max every commander that lands in the game. Okay, beyond that, there are engineering commanders, right? Ranged commanders. The ranged releases, those are pretty niche, and of the last few releases, we haven't seen like an absolute game breaking release for ranged since the beginning of 2024. Okay, so it's been 2.5 years almost since we've seen super game breaking ranged commanders. Not to say that some of these others aren't relevant, right? We have relevant ranged commanders, but not game breaking must have, oh my god, this is new meta ranged commanders, right? So if you didn't invest in ranged in the past, then it's actually not a good time to invest in ranged right now, because the current meta is 2.5 years old, right? And as field commanders get stronger and stronger and stronger, those ranged commanders, by that I mean Cordoba and Gajamada, those become more and more power crept, right? Not to say that they're bad, they still get insane reports occasionally. If you have the correct open field setup, you can really farm kill points with ranged commanders still to this day in 2026, but it's not what it once was. Okay, so that's another set of commanders you can kind of just write off, right? If you see new ranged and you don't have gear for them, you don't have armaments for them, right? And also they haven't announced new formations for ranged, right? We know that every couple of months we're going to be getting a new delta formation, a new pincer formation, and a new wedge formation, right? They've committed to that. They've said that they're coming out every 18 months. There's going to be a new release for each of those, right? So how that actually works, we're not sure. We're still waiting on the next delta, but the point is, like, they didn't include ranged in that. Okay, and if there is a troop type that needs a new formation most, it's probably ranged, because that ranged formation is focused mainly on normal damage, and they've only been releasing skill damage range since Gajamada Cordoba. So you know, it's like the writing's kind of on the wall there. The ranged commanders are on a back burner. Okay, so that's also a niche thing that most players don't have to think about. You don't have to think about ranged commanders releases until another one breaks the game, or until they release a new formation for it, and neither of those things are confirmed. Now Elizabeth, we're gonna wait for testing. Maybe she breaks the game, we don't know. Right now it seems like on paper she wouldn't, but hey, you gotta wait for the testing. Okay, so then it's like, all right, you really only have to think about like 3 or 4 commanders every year that are field relevant. Okay, let's call it 4. Let's say there's 1 field cavalry, infantry, archer, and leadership that lands every year, maybe an open field kvk commander. Okay, so 5 commanders a year that you have to even think about. How do you know which of those to invest in, right? Well, the answer is you wait for the community. The whales are going to get it. Okay, the whales are going to get it. You wait for the community to get it, and you see if it's significantly better than what you already have. Okay, so if we take a look at the most recent relevant open field commander to land on the game, which was Alp Arslan, this is a great example of a commander that most players don't actually need, right? And I know that sounds a little bit crazy if you know how good he can be, but from actual kvk fighting data, he doesn't pull down nearly as many kill points points or a better ratio than other archer pairings, particularly because we've got, you know, Emperor Qin is just an outlier amongst everyone else. He's a god amongst mere mortals, really. So it's like, okay, if the commander doesn't land in the single best pairing of that troop type, then you kind of don't even need to think about them at launch, right? Unless you've built up an insane surplus of sculptures, which is what I did, which is why I invested in Alp myself, money where my mouth is, right? In 2026, I'm moving to a 6-army setup. I made an entire video about that. You can watch it on the channel, all right? But unless you have a crazy surplus of sculptures built up, you don't have to think about these commanders that don't land in the single best army lineup, right? Because what happens is if you only ever get the best commanders that land in the single best army, then over time you're replacing the best with the new best, and so that doesn't make the old best irrelevant, right? That makes them second best. And so then if you expand to a 2-army lineup, so you have 2 infantry or 2 cavs or 2 archers, now you've got the best and the second best, right? And that's how that works. So really what you're looking for is when new commanders land in the game, you don't want them to be on the same level as what's already in the game. Okay, what you're looking for is a commander that is irrefutably better than what's already there, than what's already being used, to the point where they actually land in the single best army of that troop type. And so we saw that this year with Sun Tzu Prime. We used to do Bai Qi Liu Che. Now we do Sun Tzu Prime with either Bai Qi or Liu Che. Recent KVK data that's been compiled shows that those two pairings actually perform almost identical, right? So the debate of, oh, Bai Qi is way better than Liu Che as a secondary, that's just, there's no data to support that. It's just not true. They perform almost exactly the same, okay? Objectively, right? Just objectively, that is what's occurring in the game, whether you feel a certain way or whatever. And, you know, I'm not here to argue that. If one definitely performs better for you, then do it, right? Just lock that in. Don't even question it, right? It doesn't matter. My point is the best infantry pairing includes Sun Tzu Prime and somebody else. Okay, so that was a commander that's like, okay, yeah, invest in Sun Tzu Prime. Obviously, that's what you want to do. Gengem Chan is a commander that's like kind of in the middle, right? Like if you did Arthur with Achilles, you've got a really strong commander pair, arguably best cavalry in the game, but technically it's super glass cannon. And so there's going to be a lot of situations in KVK where that march absolutely gets clobbered, right? And it actually trades horribly if you're on the back foot. And so in the case of Gengem Chan, it's like, well, in many cases he is part of the best cav lineup, but in some cases he's not. So it's like, okay, if you got the sculptures, grab him, especially if you're running 2 calves, right? Then you need him, but otherwise you could skip him. Emperor Qin, another great example. We saw him in the middle of 2025. He's a year old, by the way. I can't believe I'm saying that. Emperor Qin is 1 year old. Okay, he was a commander that was cut above, just created a new tier of commander. That's how good he was. He was not S tier. He created S plus single-handedly with his bare hands. He manifested a new tier of commander better than everything else. He was basically a mythic tier commander amongst mere legends, right? It was almost like a different level entirely. So yes, that's a commander you must have. Okay, but that's kind of how you want to look at this, right? When it feels like, oh my god, there's so many new legendaries coming into the game, what you have to do is kind of take a step back and evaluate each individual commander. Not only, you know, is it going to completely change your lineup, right? Like, is this the best of the best? Is it actually a must have, or is it just hyped, right? And then on top of that, you have to look at your own account investments, right? Because for some commanders, it might be an obvious slam dunk, and for your account, it's not, right? Like if you are only running 1 archer march, then Alp Arslan is an obvious skip, right? He's not part of the best lineup for archers, then you're not going to use him, obviously skip. For other players, they're running a 2 archer lineup, well, you obviously better get him, right? He's obviously going to land in that 2nd army slot. He's obviously an improvement for you, and that's what you kind of have to determine for your own account, right? Is it worth it for me, and is it the best commander of that troop type, right? Those are the 2 variables I would consider. Do they change the game? Yes or no? And then do they change the game for you? Yes or no? Those are the 2 questions you have to answer, and for a lot of commanders the answer is no, right? And so for example, like with Hector was a commander that would change the game for me, but he doesn't break the game for regular field fighters, right? Like, yes, he's good in some garrisons and he is very good behind King Arthur, right? But he's not like a, oh yeah, he's going to be in the meta forever type of commander. So I've been getting the dailies for him, but I'm not actually going all in for Hector, right? And now we see Vercingetorix landing in the game, and it's like, you know, is he going to break the game? Maybe. I'm going to wait for testing, right? But I don't feel feel like he's gonna really move the needle to the point where, oh my god, I'm gonna use him forever, especially because we know new calves are coming probably sometime in September, right? It could be a little bit later, but the point is we know new calves are coming. The developers have already announced new calves are coming in the video where they showed the new Pelagius, because they said, I think it was Leo or a goose, they said specifically Pelagius is not part of the calf release cycle, okay, which implies there's a calf release cycle coming. Okay, so we know they're coming. So Vercingetorix, I would slap him behind my King Arthur, but is he going to be outdated in 2 months? Because if so, then like, okay, well, I'm not going to get him, right? And then on top of that, Vercingetorix is an MGE commander, which is like, what is that, bro? Like, if anybody was going to get an event, it shouldn't be legendary Pelagius, it should have been Vercingetorix, right? Because then there was a chance I would get him. If they had an event where you unlock Vercingetorix just through playing the game daily, then okay, maybe I would have dumped sculptures into him, but I'm not going to compete in Mightiest Governor for Vercingetorix. Like, I mean, unless he absolutely breaks the game with his mechanics, which he could, I'm not really buying it, right? So that's kind of, you know, my logic that I use when I feel like, okay, there's so many commanders in the game, what do I do, right? You have to evaluate it. Will they break the game, and will they break the game for you? And if the answer is yes to the second one but no to the first one, or if it's no to both of them, then you just skip them, right? So now we're only evaluating, like I said, maybe 5 commanders a year where you have to run that test. You know, do they change the meta, and do they change the meta for you? You run that test for those 5 commanders, and you're going to find that a lot of times the answer is no, right? I mean, if we look back, a lot of these commanders were skippable. I mean, William Wallace in 2024 was kind of the only commander you needed besides Hermann Prime back then, and maybe you could argue Ragnar Prime. He was very good for a while, kind of fell off. Philip, I guess you could argue you needed him, but it wasn't like, if you're only running 1 cav army, you certainly didn't, right? So it's like, I don't know, like 2024 is a good example of a year where it's like there's only, you know, 2 or 3 commanders that you might use, and I don't think any of the commanders in 2024 were changed the meta commanders, except for ranged, right? Ranged were the only ones that had a breakout year that year, but none of these commanders were like, oh my god, game changer, except maybe Hermann Prime because he was behind Zhuge Liang, right? And look, I've been playing Rise of Kingdoms since October 25th 2018. Okay, I actually started about 2 weeks earlier than that, but I created this account afterwards to play with people in a different kingdom. But either way, my point is I've been here basically since launch, okay? And I personally cannot recall a year in Rise of Kingdoms where they released like 4 or 5 must-have commanders, like they just, you, if you don't have them, your account is cooked. I just don't recall that, right? Every year there's only maybe 2 or 3 legendaries that are worth investing in, and that's pretty much it. So even when you feel like, oh, there's 18 commanders this year, oh my god, there's 16 commanders this year, it's like, yeah, of those 16, there's probably at most 3 that you even care about, right? So then it's like, okay, well, if there are 3 commanders a year that you do care about, then that means you need to get 2070 legendary commander sculptures per year just to stay afloat with the current meta, right? So let's divide that by 365, okay? And that means on average you need to get 5.6 legendary commanders per day. Let's call it 6, okay? You need to get 6 legendary commander sculptures per day on average, okay, in order to keep up with the meta. And that sounds like a lot, but once you hit VIP 14, you're already halfway there, right? This gives you 3 sculptures per day. So okay, the other sculptures have to come from events, right? You have to get them from Wheel of Fortunes, you have to get them from events that give you universal commander sculptures, like the Kurok ceremony, the 7k gem event, the anniversary events. Like when you start to really think about all that, it's like, okay, well, if you're VIP 14, then you really shouldn't have any trouble keeping up with the meta at all, because all those events that I just mentioned, they add up pretty quick. And if you don't believe me, I actually have a guide on the channel that tells you all the different ways you can get legendary commander sculptures, even from places that you don't even think about. So check that video out on the channel. It's a very long video, it's very extensive, it covers literally everything. But even if you find yourself coming up short because maybe, okay, let's say you're VIP 12, okay, and you're only getting 2 commander sculptures a day, well, okay, that means that there's 1 must-have commander that you need to skip every year just to stay competitive, right? Or just to have the latest and greatest. It's like, okay, well, if you're running a 5 army lineup, you're probably doing a 2-2-1 lineup, right? So it's like, okay, well, pick the worst troop type that you're running, and then just that's the one you have to sacrifice, unfortunately, right? But you could still be relatively competitive. And so that's kind of how I look at this. Does it feel like there's a lot of new commanders landing in the game right now? Yes, absolutely. I can understand why people feel that way. We've got lots of commanders coming out right now, okay, and we've got more commanders for the rest of the year. In fact, the second half of 2026 I feel like is going to have more commanders than the first half of 2026 because of the long wait for Alp Arslan and Hayam. But with that being said, I don't think that you need to hit the panic button right now and be like, oh my god, commanders are coming out so fast, I'm never going to keep up, because really, like, they could release as many commanders as they want, but if they don't move the needle on the meta, then literally you just don't think about them, right? Like, just put them in the garbage. You don't have to think about that, right? Now there's some instances, some rare cases where commanders actually come back into the meta. Like, for example, William Wallace was like arguably meta when he came out, or at least meta adjacent, but you could use Alex and get basically the exact same or better reports. And then he sort of like faded a little bit with Bai Chi, and then he kind of popped back up into relevance when we saw Sun Tzu Prime land in the game, right? So, and then also the hit and run meta kind of got a little bit weaker, not so much, but a little bit weaker. So my point is, like, there's some instances where commanders like fall off and come back. I mean, Alex is a great example of that. YSG is a great example of that. But for the most part, you know, as commanders age, they just age out of the meta, and that's it. So you don't have to think about them ever again. But guys, this video has been way longer than I thought it would be. So hopefully you found some value here. Hopefully you kind of understand the strategy that I use when I feel like, okay, there's a lot of commanders coming in the game. What do I do? Right? You return to basics. So hopefully this video helped you, and also hopefully it helped you understand what's coming down the pipeline, what to expect for the rest of 2026 with the upcoming Cavs, infantry, and KVK commanders. If you did make it to the end of the video and you found it useful or informative, please drop a thumbs up down below. It helps out the channel way more than you think. And if you're on mobile, use the hype feature after you like the video. It really helps out the channel a ton. Comment down below your thoughts on all of this. Am I right about this stuff, or do you think no, there's just too many commanders? Let me know in the comment section below. And you might think you're subscribed because you've seen a ton of my videos, but you're actually not. Double check down below. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.